One of the challenges that we all run into as science fiction and fantasy fans is the machinery. Why are things called the way that they are? Why are certain vehicles or ships given different designations, right? And there doesn't really seem to be anything concise that helps people to understand exactly what it is that they're looking at, or to have an understanding as, say, a mecha designer, a world builder, lore master, or storyteller, in understanding how to design their own machines or come up with unique ideas and make them believable, if that's what we're after. And you get a lot of confusion out there because you have a ton of public opinion, a bunch of experts who will say the same things as a public opinion. You get truth by common knowledge, which is essentially everybody in the public sphere and the expert or expertise circles who are all saying the same thing. And then you can also get, us veterans who we can get things wrong too. But to have some sort of a concise list, well, maybe not concise because this is a pretty broad topic, but to have something that will give everybody like a baseline adaptable foundation to understanding how to write, designate, and portray the machines that you want to have in, say, a series that you're writing, or maybe you're just running an RPG and you want to be able to get the vehicles right, or you're going to create your own and you want, you just want to understand how to name, these vehicles that you have, because you're portraying a different kind of, nation, say, for your military adventure or space opera. Maybe it could be, a cyberpunk adventure, which, those are always fun because you get to play around with a lot of technology. And it can, so you go to look for references, you look up documentaries, and say people are giving a whole bunch of different information, and then it's really confusing. And of course, you get all the arguments online. But one of the things you can do is, if you do understand some of those things, or a lot of them, politely try to help people. And that's something I've always wanted to do. I love military history. I was a gunner in the Navy. Been studying military machinery almost all my life. Don't know everything. You gotta be humble about that. But there's quite a bit to learn, and it helps if you have people who are willing to try and help others, and that's what I want to do. So I want to create a series of ongoing videos that are going to help the aforementioned, say, mecha designers, world builders, lore masters, storytellers, and fans to understand a lot of the mechanized machinery that we have, or what we love to call mecha. And that involves things like tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, robots, ships, starships, aircraft, just all these things that we all nerd out and love to read about and discover, and I want to give that baseline foundation, which again I said is adaptable. And what I mean by adaptable is you can take that information real world information, and adapt that to whatever kind of series you're designing or build or world building, right? Sorry, whatever mecha you're designing or worlds that you're building, so that you get that believability. And if I put it another way, it's so that when you're no, let's try that another way. When you have that basic knowledge, historical knowledge, as best as and as accurate as you can get it, of the machines and how they were used, why they were called what they were called, why they were designated the way they were designated. So, for instance, the Abrams, right? We all know the Abrams main battle tank, or Leopard 2s, or the new Panther that's coming out, or IDF Merkava. The Abrams, it's called the M1, and you have A1, M1, A2, M1, A3, MBT, main battle tank. And it's an Abrams class armored fighting vehicle. So, giving everybody that historical knowledge and also hopefully an understanding of why the vehicles are called what they're called. So you can take that and then design your own vehicles and call them something different and have that be believable because you understand historically why they were called tanks, why they were called battle cruisers, why they're, why this is a fighter, why that's an attack aircraft. And then you can go in and, call them whatever you would like, come up with some new terminology, and then if a fan or somebody else says, hey, why are you calling it this? Or you get challenged and somebody says, hey, that's supposed to be, a fighter bomber. You can say, well, yeah, you're correct. But the reason why I call it this is that, yes, it's modeled after a fighter bomber, but I have this different term for it, and here's the reason why. And it's modeled after, this historical, evidence or, whatnot. And it helps to just give some more believability to what you're doing. That's always nice. So a lot of the confusion comes about, it can be really frustrating because you'll have a lot of different voices out there. And of course you get sites like Wikipedia, which can be good for like different source material when you look at the bibliographies, but there's a lot of public opinions there because it's a public forum. That's all it is. A lot of debates about whether it should be taken legitimately or not. I'd say with something like Wikipedia, use it as, hey, it's a public conversation. I can go look at, say you're looking up something on Arleigh Burke destroyers, in the U.S. Navy, or the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, GMSCF, and you read all these different opinions in this public forum. You can then take that and then say go to the United States Navy site, pull off what information you can. Just to let you know, whenever you look at anything in a military book or military source, there's a lot of things that, for good reason, because that can't be said to the public. So, and that's just to protect all the men and women out there, family members of people who decided to serve. For example, if you look at the stats on warships, the modern ones, you'll see a lot of things about their speed, and it'll say they only do 30 knots plus. The plus part is the reading in between the lines, because you do go a lot faster. In some cases, it's pretty true. Might be an older vessel. But, it's not somewhat, with that information, yeah, it's incomplete technically, but you, as a writer, world builder, or a mecha designer can say, okay, cool. I'm going to have this design that I'm making go this fast, or it's going to have this, this kind of tough armor. It's going to have these amazing weapon systems on it. It's like when you look at something like the U.S. Navy's Sea-Wiz close-in weapon system, or what the Army adopted, calling it the C-RAM. Those systems are very effective. They can take down projectiles, they can take down missiles, aircraft, obviously, which if anybody's trying to strafe any of those sites in some sort of World War II style tactics, they're suicidal. It's not a long-term survival strategy. And see, just to get back on topic. So, yeah, I've always wanted to help people out so that when they're designing their series or their epic universes, they can have that level of, some like a good basic understanding and give their world more believability and accuracy, and because a lot of people, they want that. Some storytellers, they're just like, I'm doing really cool. I just want to get the story out there because I just find all these things really cool, and I hope everybody else will find it cool. So, in that case, hey, have at it. Go have fun. That's what this is all supposed to be about. And there's a frustration a lot of times that comes about because people want to, they want to understand, especially when they love having conversations about this subject matter. And you got a lot of people out there who, they're going to be rude, or you got the know-it-alls. and there's a polite way to have a conversation about machines and whatnot. But, sorry, I'm rattling on. You'll find I do that a lot because I'm a nerd for all this stuff and I love it. So, to help people, I said tutorials, I think, but really what they are is I want to make guidelines. And the guidelines, they're adaptable. So basically, it's kind of like when you're learning anything, right? You get a baseline of information, and it helps you at least give you a basic understanding of a subject matter. And then you can take that and expand on it, if that makes sense. And when you expand on it, you're able to start generating your own ideas. So, for instance, let's say you start out with mecha design and you start studying about tanks. So you go to World War II and you're like, okay, well, this is a tank. They had light, medium, heavy tanks. In the case of German super heavy tanks, because, Germany. And that gives you a basic understanding of, these three different kinds of vehicles. And then you discover, oh, wait a minute, there's these half-treks, and then there's APCs, and there's IFVs, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's all this information. And if you're able to dig into why machines are called what they are, it can help you understand how you should name them. Let me try that again. Sorry, I can get really confusing. So being able to understand, for example, what's the difference between, pardon me, between, say, a light cruiser, a heavy cruiser, and a battle cruiser. Those can be pretty confusing, right? Because they all have the name cruiser. Of course, one of them is a capital ship, the battle cruiser, and another is, the other two, the light cruiser and the heavy cruiser, fall within the cruiser categories for ships, but they're not capital ships. So these are, three completely different vessels. Why is a light cruiser called a light cruiser? Why is a heavy cruiser called a heavy cruiser? And once you get the understanding of that, then it can help you to design your own unique ships. Call them, very unique names. And then when people ask why did you call it this? Because my understanding is this is how ships are named, and whatnot. And you can say, well, the reason for that is in history, here's why these cruisers were called this, or here's why a frigate was called a frigate. And I just took that and decided to create this new kind of ship type, and here's why. And you can give them either a detailed breakdown or just a basic breakdown, and it gives believability to what you're doing, and that helps. And it's nice as a especially a storyteller, as a lore master. If you're making videos about different navies or different armies or air forces or space forces, it's nice to have an understanding about why the ships in the universe you're looking at are called what they're called, because that can get really confusing. If you like, take for example like Babylon 5, right? They have destroyers and they have cruisers, they have dreadnoughts. What are the other ones in the Earth Force? Well, taking those. And when you look at it, the destroyers are larger than the cruisers, but the way the destroyers are treated, they're treated like capital ships, which in the real world would make no sense because destroyers can't be a capital ship. They're always an escort vessel. But if you understand, say, looking at history, ships get bigger as they go throughout history, and you develop new technology and whatnot. Examples like light cruisers of World War II could go up to around 4,000 tons at the early part of the war. So I guess those are more interim war designs. So they could get up to, start out, say, 4,000 tons. Well, modern day guided missile frigate can be 4,000 tons as well, because the weapon systems got bigger, they got heavier, required a lot more sensors and whatnot, so the ships had to get bigger. So if you had those sailing together, yeah, one would be a say 1930s light cruiser, right, 4,000 tons, and then another would be a Cold War era frigate. Well, a frigate's much smaller than a cruiser. So you could look at something like Babylon 5 and go, well, these destroyers, the requirements for what defines a escort vessel have gone way up, and in this case it's pretty gigantic. And that could be one way you could explain it, is that the requirements for what defines a destroyer have gone way up, and as a result, capital ships in this world are probably ginormous. There's these huge monstrosities. Kind of hopefully give an understanding of what we're looking at. Because oftentimes the terms just kind of get thrown around everywhere. and it creates a lot of confusion, and I want to help to dispel that confusion. Also understand like what era we may be looking at something, because again, like that light cruiser example, or light cruiser and frigate example, the requirements could change. So what something is called, the definition of it may be different in a different era. For example, you could have, let's say this is a guided missile frigate, this vessel here. And, today we'd understand, okay, it's a frigate, it's a small vessel. But then, and forgive me, this is not going to be accurate whatsoever, but so we'll make it kind of a fantasy frigate. But then we go back to, the age of sail, right? Yeah, feel free to laugh at this. It's probably not a good representation. We'll get the gun deck in here with all the gun ports. Yeah, forgive me. The sails aren't going to make any sense either. And so we've got a sailing vessel here, which comparatively, realistically, is going to be much smaller than this modern day frigate. Although maybe they would be about the same. But this frigate in this era would be from the age of sail, whereas this frigate would be in the age of steam and missiles, or nuclear power and missiles. Steam and guided missile era, you could say. So you have the sailing era and or sailing age of sail, and you got the age of missiles. And these are going to be two very different vessels. Now, this vessel is the historical foundation for this one. And, when you study that history, you see why the name was passed down and how it can kind of change over time. And, like having a historical basis can help you when you're designing your own worlds, or you're trying to figure out, what should I call this? Or, is there a good reason why I could call this a tank, or I could call this a certain kind of ship? Sorry, I think I made that more confusing than it needed to be. But the guidelines would be adaptable. And with them being adaptable, you can, once you understand that information, then you can basically take it and run with it yourself. And start to build out your own worlds with, how you think that they should be, or how you want to design them, And that's a lot of fun. Just kind of designing your own machinery, giving some more believability to your world, and basically just wanting to have fun, Because that's the whole point of this, We have stories we want to tell, characters we want to develop, and one of the things that really gets lost in the mix of world building are the machines, the mecha design, or mechanical design, conceptual design. And they're always kind of treated as kind of these props, they're supporting characters. Most of the time. I mean, you get those, in the West, you get those hero ships, right? And USS Enterprise, there's an example. Rocinante from The Expanse, another example. And occasionally, we'll get vehicles that pop up there. You get Fury, love that tank. Or in real life, you get something like, Tiger 131 over at the Tank Museum in Bloomington, and or any of the museum pieces, And where was I going with that? Holy cow, I went to rambling. But yeah, here, let's see. Where was I going? Hero ships. Oh, props. Right. Sorry. So a lot of times mecha and the machinery and stuff like that, and the weapon systems. So you get into individual weapon systems, or rifles, sidearms, machine guns, blasters, and they just kind of take a back seat to character development. And a lot of times they're not really treated with any kind of real world detail, right? Because how many times have you looked at a series and you're like, oh man, okay, this character is cool. I've got their background, I've got their history. But when I get to the machines, it's like a brief overview. And then, of course, that sparks the fandom, which is cool. Because then the fandom is able to sit, speculate and start to try to figure out, how these machines operate. What were they called? What's the history of them? And it'd be nice to have, again, adaptable guidelines to be able to really give a lot of detail into these vehicles so that people can dive into them and really enjoy those additional details to the world that you're building, because there's a lot of us gearheads out there and mecha nerds, and we love having all those little details. And I think as a mecha designer, it's nice to provide that kind of thing. As a world builder, especially, that was one of the things that very much attracted me to anime, and I'd say a lot of us got attracted to anime because we would get the source books for, say, a series, and you get to the mecha designs, and holy cow, there was a wealth of information in there. There are blueprints. They'd tell you who designed it, why it was designed, where it was designed, what the battle history was of the machines, and that's great. And you need that kind of detail as well. So that's something else I'm hoping to change, is to take the machinery a lot more seriously. Now, if that's not your thing, and you're like, hey, that is just a supporting element of what I'm creating, totally understand. That's the way the story goes. Now, you might get asked questions from your fans, and they go, hey, why is this called this, or what's the history of this machine, this mecha, be it a robot or a vehicle, again, mecha meaning mechanized. And hopefully, the guidelines or the guides that I'm going to create would also help out people who don't want to put a whole lot. Their vehicles and their mecha machine designs are basically their supporting elements in their worlds. Hopefully those guides can help them to give enough information that it'll help satisfy the fans, or most of the fans who have questions about that. Now, your gearheads and your super rabid, otaku, who, we all love like the super fine details. It's kind of like watching Galaxy Quest. At one point in that movie, the main characters have no idea how to get through part of the ship, and so they call up a whole bunch of fans of the sci-fi series, which has become real in the movie, and they're like, "We need your help. What are the super deep dive nerdy geeky details that that you can tell us?" And these guys immediately network, call up all their friends, and they help out the main characters. And I'm one of those guys. I love the deep details. you know, and you'll discover, you know, if you are too, because you'll have those. If you're one of those people where you're watching a military adventure, a sci-fi, you know, be it aliens or, you know, battleship on the, you know, I guess that's big dumb fun, right? Or, you know, the Expanse or Battlestar Galactica or whatnot, or Space Battleship Yamato. Uh, and in some cases, you're going, oh, I really love this stuff. Look at all the detail. This is really cool. And your friends are kind of going, oh, you know, okay, there they go again. Or you're watching something like, say, The Expanse, uh, or Babylon 5 or Star Trek, and they start misusing terminology, and you're just kind of sitting there sighing or kind of, you know, rolling your eyes, and your friends are looking at you like, oh boy, are they going to go off on a rant, you know? Which is, let's face it, that's always really funny. Um, oh, I made that term wrong. Holy cow. Let me correct that. Guided missile. So, yeah, that's my objective, is to make those guidelines. I apologize for any confusion. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Also, if there's any critiques, like constructive critiques, you know, let's try to help each other out. Definitely put those in there. You know, I'm learning as I do this. I always try to treat it like I'm just talking to fellow geeks and nerds, or otaku, or fans, or gearheads, you know, friends, and just having a good time, just nerding out. This is a wide topic. It's huge. Again, this will be an ongoing series of videos, so there's no, you know, this is a limited series because I don't want to be that kind of channel. There's some great guidelines out there, some great tutorials, but a lot of them are mostly kind of limited series because of the way this is treated. So, yeah, that's basically what I want to do, and once I get those started, I will start posting them. So, hey, you guys take care. Have fun designing and creating mecha and nerding out and being geeks. Don't let anybody tell you can't do it. Just start. And yeah, just take care. And all right, love you guys.